Hey, I know that you are creating content. You're putting it out on all of your platforms. Maybe you're not seeing the results that you would really like. One thing that you can do to make your message and your content much more powerful is to be really clear on what you're sharing. And I'm going to share tips on how you can do that right now. My name's Winnie Anderson. I am a content designer and consultant. I work with service-based businesses to help them nail their message and get their message out through powerful content that actually helps their prospects decide to buy. No selling involved. In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you these tips that are simple, actionable, and practical so you can improve the power of both your messaging and your content. Let's dive in. Before we get started, though, of course, you know how this works. So if you have any questions, be sure to share them right below here. I'm happy to circle back and respond if I don't answer them on this session. If you're watching this on replay, post your questions anyway, because again, I always come back and respond. And if you want to share this with people you know, please do that. I'm sure that they'll appreciate getting these tips. And of course, I appreciate you sharing the message. So, like I said, let's dive in and talk about some simple things that you can do to make your message more powerful. So much competition out there, right? So many people who are seemingly doing the things you're doing. There are other businesses that are in your region, in your community, on the internet, and they're all looking to make headway with perhaps a similar market. So it's really important that your message is powerful and compelling. And let me start by explaining what the difference is between content and messaging. We tend to use these interchangeably. They're really not. They fit together like hand in glove, and they do go together, but they are subtly different. So content refers to, and I have notes, of course, so I'll be glancing down at them periodically, and I have my other monitor over there. So content refers to the actual subject matter, the stuff that you're talking about. It's very fact-based a lot of times, and that is the subject matter that we might agonize over. What should I say? How do I organize it? It's the nuts and bolts, if you will, that you're going to be delivering. So that is really the content. The subject matter is the content. The message is often in what I refer to as the unsaid. It's communicated through the vibe that you put out. It's communicated in your voice, right? Your vocal delivery, the tone that you use. And even if you're not creating videos or audio content, you are still communicating voice, vibe, and tone through the language that you use. This is why we want to be careful to a degree of the language that we're using and the way that we lay out our sentences, because people are reading that and they're hearing their voice in their head, and they're projecting emotions onto that. So this is why content is certainly worth agonizing over and making sure that you really do nail it as best you can. Doesn't have to be perfect, because you can always go back and edit it and update it, and you really should do that also, but that's for another time. So remember, message typically will have an emotional component to it, and I'll give you a few examples. So let's say you run a dry cleaners. You may have more than one shop, but you run a dry cleaning business. So you want to put out content let's say you want to put out content that talks about how your customers, give some tips on how people can keep their clothes drier longer so they don't have to spend money going to the dry cleaner. And, that's an acknowledgement. So now we get to the message. The message is that you are sensitive to the fact that your folks are dealing with financial pressures, that inflation is causing prices to rise, and they're making tougher decisions about where to put their money. then maybe they'd like to get a little bit longer wear out of some items before they take it back to the dry cleaner. Does it hurt you? Maybe you might believe so in the short run, but in the long run, your intention is to have that content pay off, because here again is your message. You're communicating that you understand the conditions that your customers live in. You recognize the choices that they have to make. You're a nice person. You're trying to help them out and help them have their dollar stretch farther. So the content is the how to, the nuts and bolts, the subject matter that you share. And then the message is that vibe that is communicated in the unsaid of what you're sharing. And people will project that on to your message. Another example might be that maybe you run a consulting firm, and maybe you share a piece of content that talks about how to get to the root cause of a of a problem. That might be a how-to kind of article. So you write that content, and the content is the nuts and bolts, the steps that they're going to take. It's the words itself. The message, though, is in that unsaid element, showing that it's important to address root cause issues, shows that you really want to work with people who are inclined to solve a problem at its root cause, and that maybe, don't bother me if you're into band-aids, because I'm not, right? So there's that vibe that you are sharing with folks. Your message can be open to interpretation. The content, very straightforward. So that's the difference. I hope you can hear how these two fit together. Now I'm going to share with you some quick tips on how you can make your content and messaging much more powerful. First of all, you want to ask yourself why you're creating this particular content, and you're going to have more than one intention. First of all, of course, you're thinking about yourself and what this piece of content will do for your brand, what it will do for your business. So there is hopefully a clear intention that you have for this piece of content. If not, don't create content for content's sake, and don't create random acts of content, which I'll admit I sometimes do. But you want to, because sometimes something will inspire me and I'll decide to take action and create a piece of content on it. But in general, you want to have your content planned out so it fits in with your offerings and fits in with the seasonality of your business and what you happen to be promoting at any given time in your business. This is extra challenging for those folks who run a business where they're continuously getting in new clients, maybe taking in new clients into the same kind of offering. For example, a physician is always taking in people who are sick, right? But maybe if you're a general practitioner, maybe you're going to amplify talking about breast cancer awareness during October, which is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Maybe you're hoping that that will raise the awareness level with your female clients, and then attract them to come on in for whether it's a checkup, a referral, or some related care issue. So you want to make sure that you understand what your intention is, and then what your intention is for your audience. Two important concepts. You also want to think about, as I said, where does this fit in with your marketing and sales process? The challenge for those people who are constantly building awareness and looking to attract new clients and customers is that they can feel like they're always saying the same thing to attract those people in. So what you want to think about is the journey that your buyers travel to make a decision. I've talked about that before. So if you want to have a link to video I've done or ask questions about the buyer's journey, just say that below. So you have stops along the way, what your buyers are looking for as they navigate this buyer's journey. You want to make sure that you're recognizing where people get hung up, and then provide content that helps them navigate through that process. I've talked about that before. I have lots of content around that particular issue. It's the essence of the work I do, is to help clients create content that helps their buyers navigate their buying journey. Okay, so think about that. Do you have those important pieces of content that you need? If not, that's where your attention needs to go. So if you also want to think about what will the person consuming this piece of content, what will they be able to do, be, or have as a result? I mean, hopefully you're making some kind of impact on the consumer of the content. Are they, and this is why, you want to make a conscious decision. Are you creating some kind of in-depth guide? Are you giving them a few tips? Will it eventually become a guide? But you really want to think about, where does this content fit in your process, in their learning, in their deciding when to buy? Does it help retain them? Does it build your brand? What exactly does it do? You've heard this before. You want to write to the one. You want to write to one specific person. It can be really tempting to say, you say things like, friends, or you guys. You guys, for those of us who are from Jersey and the greater Philly area. The challenge here, though, is the person doesn't really feel like they're being talked to. So you want to use in print, you want to use that pronoun you. So when the person is reading it, that's what they're hearing in their head, that you're talking to me. When you're speaking and doing a video, same kind of thing. You don't want to think about that you're talking to a greater audience. You want to talk specifically to one person, so it really resonates with that person who's consuming that content. So you want to think about, and this is probably the number one thing that people resist. I've worked with businesses large and small and micro, and every business resists this. So while I respect that there's this belief that if I want more clients, not fewer, if I narrow my focus, then I'm pushing away these other people. Yeah, but they're not your best people, right? So by putting a flag in the sand, you become magnetic for those people, right? The cardiologist isn't worried about what the dentist does. So you want to think about that. Speak in language as if you're talking to one person, but also you want to think about, how can you narrow your focus? And if you're still just going to resist this entirely, then you want to think long and hard about the problem that you solve. Because the more you talk about the problem that you solve and the aspiration that they have for those who have it, it's going to start resonating with certain types of people, and you'll start seeing a pattern. However, when you focus and choose a specific target, you will automatically create more powerful copy and content, and a message, because you're going to be able to use language that's much more specific. You'll be able to use examples that really resonate with people. They're going to say, like one person said to me, I read that piece that you wrote and I knew you were talking to me. Now, was I talking to that person? Of course I was not, but I was talking to people like her. So she was really, that particular piece of content really resonated with her, because I used examples and I used language that made her feel like I was speaking to her. So you want to make sure that when you choose that language, that you use the language that your audience is using. This is really a challenge when you're talking to smart people who really might be hip to the kind of language that is maybe technical in nature, but you want to minimize that, because new people are always coming in and always learning that language. So you want to be really careful about that. But when you are specific, you can use much more compelling language that makes that person consuming the content feel like you're talking to me, right? You understand me, you get me. And that's why you want to be able to narrow your focus, because you'll be able to use more powerful examples. You want to use the active voice as much as possible. Now, I know that's kind of a grammar thing, but believe me, it's important. And the challenge with that is, if you come from a service business background and you come from a corporate background, I'm going to bet that you write in a very passive way. And that's in terms of the sentence structure. And the reason why you do that, same reason I did that, because you're service oriented. And one of the things that, I worked in the casino industry for a long time. And one of the things I used to actually have to teach people this. So I taught people how to write in a passive way. And then I would teach them in another instance how to write in an active way. It was crazy making. But when you're writing to a customer, often you're trying to tell them no without coming right out and saying no. What I can do for you is, right? So that's kind of a passive structure. An active structure, this is where sentences are typically written in the present tense, as if they're happening now, even if you're talking about something in the future. So you would not say, and I'm not saying that you can never do this, but you want to minimize it. So rather than saying, I will help you in this video, I will help you, blah, 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 you would say, I help you, blah, 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 right? That's the difference. You want to minimize the use of things like helping verbs. You want to minimize the use of verbs that end in ing, right? So you want to really use as often as possible those active present tense verbs. Trust me, it makes your writing just sound much more compelling and powerful. The other thing is you want to use short sentences when you're writing, especially when you're writing for the web. We have a tendency, I'm like a complex sentence writer. So this was something that early on in my career, I really had to work on. We speak in half sentences, we speak in complex sentences. And when somebody is there, they're hanging on what you're saying, right? They're really involved in it. But the challenge is especially when you're writing for the web, people tend to skim. They don't read in the same way as they read offline materials. So you want to use the active voice and you want to write in fairly short sentences. It just keeps the voice, the vibe, the tone, everything moving in a much more positive, not positive, strike that, in a much more active way, right? Next, I mentioned that you want to write in short sentences. You also want to write in a conversational tone. Here's what I mean by that. Like I said, it doesn't mean that you want to have these big rambly kind of sentences or half sentences or whatever, but it means that you want to take into consideration how you would normally talk to somebody. So if you would not say, hey, if you would not say to somebody who's sitting next to you, hey, call me up so we can chat about that. If you would not say that, don't write it. You would say, hey, call me up so we can talk about that. And say, talk. Now, word choice, again, people are putting their emotions on word choice. So if you think chat sounds more casual in writing, then say chat. The point is that you're trying to communicate in both the content, the subject matter, and you're trying to communicate in a vibe. And that's where the message comes in. So you want to think about how do you normally write? How do you normally talk? And we talk in contractions, right? So you want to think about that. And again, I'm not saying that you have to do this, but you want to think about what's your natural vocal style. So it might be that you want to put some video on, and believe me, you should have video all over your website, but you want to put up some videos that actually have you talking on them so people can hear, oh, that's how she speaks. So then when I'm reading your content, I get that you have that particular style. And of course, this depends on your profession and industry, the expectations of your buyers. But I can't stress this enough. You want to really try to keep things as simple and clear as possible. Remember, your objective is to be client focused, not ego focused. I'll give you a good example. My husband's a corporate attorney. Now, attorneys, they are a whole other breed of people. And of course, they write in these complex party of the first part kind of documents. I once asked people, because we used to work together, I once asked people, what about Lou sets him apart from other people? What do you who do his job? What do you really like about him? And one of the things that people said to me was, I love that he writes in plain English. So when I ask him for his official opinion, he will write me back and give me an opinion that's written in plain English. I don't have to feel stupid because I don't understand what he said. So even that is an example of a complex profession, and you are giving complex advice, but you can do it in a very simple manner that helps the reader understand what it is you're communicating, what you're saying, and use simple words too so you don't trip over them. So those are some tips, real quick, speedy recap for making your message and your content much more compelling. First of all, be clear on what your point of view is. I didn't even talk about that. I talk about that in other videos that I've done. Be really super clear on your point of view. Understand the intention that you have and the difference that you're trying to make with that piece of content. Recognize that your content is the subject matter and your message is the voice and vibe and tone that is often emotional in nature that's left to interpretation. But that's what you're trying to show and convey in your messaging. And it's why message is different from content, but they fit together hand in glove. A couple of grammar tips I shared were that you want to use the active voice, write in short sentences. And the biggest thing, write in a conversational tone. And probably the biggest thing that I would share with you is to really have an opinion. That will always make content and messaging much more powerful when you're clear about where you stand on an issue and you are not afraid to communicate it. That is especially the kind of content that is going to attract great clients and repel the wrong ones. So I hope that helps, gives you some tips on how to make your messaging content more compelling and powerful. All right. If you have any questions, feel free to post. I'm happy to answer them at some point. I might not answer them in content. I might create a video answering those questions so everybody gets to benefit from what you asked. My name is Winnie Anderson. I'm a content designer and consultant, and I work with service-based businesses to help them nail their message and get their content out in a more powerful way so their website actually works to attract buyers and help those buyers decide to buy. If you have any questions, you know how to get me. I'm more than happy to take a look at your content and see if you have the critical components that you need in order to attract and guide buyers through the buying journey. Just feel free to message me and we can talk about that. All right, have a great rest of the day. I will be back later this week with another video, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.